Ghiscari Empire. The Ghiscari Empire was one of the oldest civilizations in the known world, which ruled much of the continent of Essos, centered around the present-day region of Slavers Bay. The Ghiscari Empire was flourishing and building massive pyramids thousands of years before the rise of the Valyrian Freehold, when the Valyrians were only humble shepherds. The symbol of the empire was a harpy, a woman's head and torso, with bat wings, clawed eagle legs, and a scorpion's tail. The old Empire of Guise was one of the oldest known nations and cultures in the world. It reigned supreme over much of Essos. Its founding and golden age predate that of its successor, the Valyrian Freehold, by thousands of years. Harpy. The old empire took the harpy emblem of old Guise. It depicted a fanged woman with leathery wings for arms, the legs of an eagle, and the tail of scorpion, clutching a thunderbolt in her talons. History. 5,000 years ago, when the Valyrians discovered and mastered dragons and began to conquer outwards, the Ghiscari Empire sought to put a halt to their expansion. The two great rivals vied to be the dominant power in Essos, and in a series of 5 great wars the massive Ghiscari legions marched against the Valyrians, but each time they were defeated by the Valyrian dragons. Much of the fighting took place in and around the Valyrian Peninsula and, what would later become known as, Slavers Bay. The Valyrians finally defeated the Ghiscari Empire when their armies and their dragons attacked the empire's capital city of Guise. The buildings and streets were burned to ash, and the Valyrians sowed the earth with salt so that nothing would grow again. 5,000 years later, Old Guise is still a ruin. Rise. The old empire rose from the ancient Old Guise in Ghiscar, a city founded by Grasdan the Great. Old Guise fielded highly disciplined lockstep legions of free soldiers reputed to have been nearly unbeatable on the battlefield. The architecture of Old Guise was dominated by massive brick towers and pyramids built using slave labor. Since the Ghiscari hills were rich in copper, the old empire used bronze weapons. After colonizing nearby land, Old Guise began subjugating its neighbors. The Ghiscari expanded south to Sithorios and the Basilisk Isles, building Garrosh as a penal colony at Wyvern Point, Zemeter at the mouth of the Zamoyos, and Gorgai on the Isle of Tears. Ghiscari Wars. After the Valyrians discovered dragons and quickly rose to power, the Ghiscari wanted dragons for their own. 5 great wars were fought between Ghiscar and the Valyrian Freehold, with the tall men of the Kingdom of Sarnar participating in 3 of the conflicts. The Ghiscari won some battles, as there is a large ancient tapestry in the heart of the Great Pyramid in Meereen showing the last survivors of a defeated Valyrian army passing beneath the yoke and being chained. However, the Ghiscari eventually lost each war. The old empire fell 5,000 years ago. In the 5th Ghiscari War the Valyrians smashed the Ghiscari legions and used their dragons to burn Old Guise and its pyramids to the ground. The Valyrians sowed the fields with salt and sulfur to prevent any surviving inhabitants from returning. Aftermath. With the destruction of Old Guise, the old empire collapsed and was conquered by the Valyrian Freehold. The Valyrians learned slavery from the Ghiscari and applied it to other lands. After the doom of Valyria, the slaver cities of Slavers Bay and New Guise overthrew their Valyrian overlords and re-established control of the slave trade. During the Century of Blood, the Dothraki destroyed northern Ghiscari colonies, whose ruins are now called Krasaj Haz, Vizaf, and Viz Maja. Government. The ruling structure of the old empire is unknown. 5,000 years after the empire's fall, Hisdar Zo Lorak's list of titles includes those of Scion of Old Guise and Octarch of the Old Empire. This may imply that the empire was ruled by a council of 8, that it had 8 regional governors underneath an emperor, or that Octarch was a military title or rank. It is uncertain if Hisdar's title has any basis in the old empire's practices. People. The modern Ghiscari people are mongrels of a dozen races and peoples driven together by the empire and its fall. They are spread over a large area around Slavers Bay, west of the Gulf of Grief. Ghiscari have dense, dark amber skin and wiry hair with red highlights. Men of the slaver cities are known to wear their hairs teased, wailed, and twisted into fantastic shapes. They have wear cloaks of yellow with copper discs sewn on. Their tunics are embroidered linen. Below the waist they wear pleated linen skirts and sandals. The richest classes, who are primarily made up of slavers, wear the tokar and are fond of rich foods, such as dogs, octopus stew, and duck eggs. Legacy. The old Ghiscari language, culture, and gods were largely forgotten over time and the Ghiscari adopted the language of their Valyrian conquerors. Today most speak a dialect of High Valyrian. The crumbling walls, stepped pyramids, and harpy statues are all that remain of the old empire's glory days. The unsullied tactics are considered a remnant of Old Guise. They are trained to fight in the same disciplined lockstep manner and are considered the legions of Old Guise come again, but are slaves instead of free men. The free iron legions of New Guise are also inspired by the lockstep legions of old. The harpy was adopted as a symbol by all the slaver cities, and their silver coins are stamped with a harpy. The good masters of Astapor, the wise masters of Yunkai, and the great masters of Meereen have been training slaves for generations, much as their predecessors did, and are experts at it. The Valyrians conquered the surviving Ghiscari people as well as their outlying colonies throughout the region, including Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen. For the next 5,000 years, the Ghiscari people were ruled by the Valyrian Freehold. Indeed, very few Ghiscari survived the destruction of the empire, and combined with 5,000 years of intermingling with other conquered peoples that the Valyrians incorporated into their colonies, the bloodline of the Ghiscari Empire actually runs very thin in modern-day Slavers Bay. However, after the doom of Valyria 400 years ago, the local Ghiscari cities east of the Gulf of Grief reasserted their independence, during the chaotic civil wars known as the Century of Blood, with a handful of aristocrats establishing great wealth and power by ruthlessly exploiting a vast slave population, to the point that the entire geographical region became known as Slavers Bay. The city of New Guise was also founded on an island further south of the bay. The new ruling elites of the slaver cities fashioned new titles for themselves: the good masters of Astapor, the wise masters of Yunkai, and the great masters of Meereen. Despite being separated from the Ghiscari Empire by 5,000 years' worth of racial and cultural intermingling, the ruling elites of these slaver cities looked back onto the past glories of the old local empire as a way of reasserting their independence, latching onto whatever cultural trappings and heritage had survived the centuries. After they regained their independence, the slaver cities of Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen also began using harpies on their flags, with different variants for each city, emulating the harpy symbol of the old Ghiscari Empire. Even in the present day, many aristocratic slavers from these cities think of the Ghiscari Empire as their empire. The original language of the Ghiscari Empire, now known as Old Ghiscari, went extinct as the Valyrians forced their subjects to speak the language of their conquerors. Old Ghiscari did influence the common variant of Low Valyrian, which developed in Slavers Bay mostly in a few loanwords such as Misa, mother, and a few grammatical structures. Ever after their independence, however, Old Ghiscari had been a dead language for so long that the cities of Slavers Bay continued to speak in a variant of Valyrian. Known cities: Astapor, Gozai, Gagossos, Valyrian name for Gorgai, Garrosh, Krasaj Haz, Dothraki name for Gardak, Meereen, New Guise, Old Guise. These Diaf, Dothraki name for Hasdan Mo. These F, Dothraki name, Ghiscari name unknown. These Maja, Dothraki name, Ghiscari name unknown. Yunkai, Zemeter. In the books. In the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, the old Empire of Guise was founded many millennia ago by Grazdan the Great. One of the oldest civilizations in the known world, Guise's golden age, was thousands of years before the rise of the Valyrians 5,000 years ago. The World of Ice and Fire, 2014, explains that the old Empire of Guise is the oldest civilization in the world and can back up this claim with reliable written records. These records provide proof that Guise predates the Long Night 8,000 years ago, though it was only in its infancy at the time. ET also claims to be the oldest civilization in the known world, but it cannot fully back up this claim, because its surviving written records only begin slightly after the Long Night ended. This still makes ET the oldest continuous civilization in the world, however, having survived 8,000 years from the Long Night to the present day. In contrast, the old Empire of Guise only lasted about 3,000 years, from a little over 8,000 years ago to its destruction 5,000 years ago. The old empire's reach extended to nearby Sithorios, where it conducted slaving raids, much as the modern Ghiscari slaver cities do. The empire even maintained a penal colony in the northeast of Sithorios at Garrosh, but it was destroyed by tsunamis during the Doom of Valyria. After the Doom, the peoples of Slavers Bay attempted to reassert their independence by championing their descent and cultural heritage from the old empire now that their Valyrian overlords were gone. In reality, however, 5,000 years of domination by the Valyrians took their toll, and present-day Slavers Bay only has certain scraps of culture and traditions which date back to the old empire itself. The region's current inhabitants are a mixed race, descended from the small surviving Ghiscari population which intermingled with many other enslaved peoples under the Valyrians. Even the present-day dialects of Slavers Bay owe more to High Valyrian than they do to the old Ghiscari language. Much like the local peoples in the free cities, once the Valyrians were gone they developed their own Romance dialect of Valyrian. However, the Low Valyrian of Slavers Bay is quite different from the dialects in the free cities, because it borrows heavily from the older Ghiscari languages. Misa in Slavers Bay Low Valyrian is a direct borrowing of the word for mother in the ancient Ghiscari language. Still, in terms of basic structure, the language is really a derivation of High Valyrian with some Ghiscari influence, and the language of the Old Empire is largely extinct. Guise is a blend of real-life civilizations such as Egypt, Greece, Rome, and Carthage. The rivalry between the Valyrian Freehold and the Old Empire of Guise seems to be a narrative echo of the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage, with Old Guise sharing Carthage's fate.
Se você gostou do conteúdo, não se esqueça de dar like e se inscrever no canal. Eu fico aqui, até a próxima!